Jin wiped the sweat from his forehead as he crawled through the narrow tunnel. Deep beneath the surface of Kepler 442b, the mining planet was hot and dusty and full of dangerous holes that could swallow a man whole. He had been working as a salvage engineer for 3 years now and thought he knew every corner of this rock. But today was different. Today he had found something that should not exist. The tunnel opened into a massive underground chamber. The walls were smooth and black, like glass, but they seemed to pulse with a faint blue light. Jin had never seen anything like it in all his years of digging through alien ruins. His headlamp beam danced across strange symbols carved into the walls, symbols that seemed to move when he was not looking directly at them. This had to be Veltar architecture. Everyone in the galaxy knew about the Veltar Empire. They had ruled over thousands of worlds 3,000 years ago, before they mysteriously vanished overnight. Archaeologists found their ruins on dozens of planets, but nobody had ever found anything this well preserved. The Galactic Council had strict laws about Veltar sites. Nobody was allowed to touch anything. Nobody was allowed to take anything, and definitely nobody was allowed to wear anything. But Jin was alone down here, and nobody would ever know in the center of the chamber stood a tall crystal pillar that reached from floor to ceiling. Inside the crystal something waited, something that made Jin catch his breath and step closer, even though every instinct told him to run. The object inside looked like a suit of armor, but it was unlike anything he had ever seen. The armor seemed to be made of liquid metal that flowed and shifted even while trapped in the crystal. The surface was smooth and seamless, changing from silver to deep blue to black as the light hit it. From different angles, strange symbols glowed softly along what looked like the arms and chest pieces. The helmet was sleek and smooth with no visible eye holes or breathing vents. Jin walked around the crystal pillar 3 times. His hands shook as he reached for his scanner. The device beeped and chirped as it analyzed the crystal prison. The readings made no sense. The crystal was not really crystal at all, but some kind of energy field that had been holding the armor in perfect stasis for thousands of years. He should have left right. Then he should have marked the location and reported it to his supervisor. He should have followed the rules. But Jin had always been too curious for his own good. His mother used to say that curiosity would get him in trouble someday. She had been right. The energy field flickered for just a moment when his scanner beam hit it. Jin stepped back in surprise, but nothing else happened. He tried again, holding the scanner steady. The field flickered again, and this time he heard a soft humming sound that seemed to come from the armor itself. Something was waking up. Jin knew he should run, but his feet would not move. The armor was beautiful in a way that made his chest tight. It looked like it had been made for a warrior, but also for someone who valued art and grace. The craftsmanship was beyond anything humans could create, even with their most advanced technology. This was the work of a civilization that had mastered both war and beauty. The humming grew louder and the symbols on the armor began to pulse faster. The crystal prison started to crack. Thin lines of light appeared in the energy field, spreading outward like a spider web. Jin finally found his voice and started to back toward the tunnel entrance, but it was too late. Crystal shattered with a sound like breaking bells. The armor fell to the stone floor with a metallic ring that echoed through the chamber. For a moment nothing happened. Jin stood frozen in the tunnel entrance, ready to run. The armor lay still and silent on the ancient stones. Then it moved. The liquid metal began to flow and shift. The pieces of the suit started to rise from the floor, moving like they were alive. The helmet turned toward Jin, and he could swear he saw lights flickering where the eyes should be. The armor stood up smoothly, gracefully, like a dancer rising from sleep. Jin ran. He scrambled through the tunnel as fast as he could, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. His headlamp beam bounced wildly as he crawled and climbed toward the surface. Behind him he could hear something following. The sound was not heavy footsteps, but a strange sliding whisper like metal flowing over stone. He burst out of the tunnel entrance and into the pale light of Kepler 442b as Twin Suns, the mining site was empty. Most of the workers had gone back to the main settlement for lunch. Tae-jin looked back at the tunnel mouth, expecting to see the armor pursuing him, but nothing emerged. Maybe he had imagined it. Maybe the stress of working alone in the deep tunnels had finally gotten to him. Maybe a hand touched his shoulder. Tae-jin spun around and nearly fell over. There was no one there. But when he looked down at his shoulder, he saw a silver handprint burned into his worksuit. The metal of his tools and equipment had started to change color, turning the same flowing silver as the armor. The handprint was warm as he watched in growing horror. The silver began to spread. The color flowed across his worksuit like spilled mercury. His tools clattered to the ground. As the metal consumed his gloves, the warmth spread up his arms and across his chest. It should have hurt, but instead it felt like coming home after a long journey. Tae-jin tried to pull the silver substance off, but his hands passed right through it. This was not something coating his clothes. This was something changing him. The silver reached his neck and he felt a tingling sensation as it flowed over his skin. Then the voice spoke inside his head. "Welcome, heir of flesh. I am Kethmore, guardian of the destroyer mantle. I have waited long for one worthy to wear the sacred armor. You have passed the first test by approaching without fear and touching without greed." Tae-jin opened his mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The silver had covered his face now and was reshaping itself into the sleek helmet he had seen in the crystal prison. He could see perfectly through metal that looked solid from the outside. His vision was sharper than it had ever been. He could see individual dust motes floating in the air and count the scales on a lizard sunning itself 50 meters away. The armor finished forming around him, and suddenly, Tae-jin felt strong. Stronger than any human had a right to feel. He looked at his hands encased in flowing silver metal and slowly made a fist. The armor responded like it was part of his body, like he had been wearing it his whole life. This was impossible. Humans could not wear Veltar technology. Everyone knew that the armor would reject anyone who was not of pure Veltar bloodline. That was why the Galactic Council kept all Veltar artifacts locked away in museums and research facilities. But here he was wearing the most advanced piece of technology ever created, and it fit him perfectly. A shadow fell across him, and Tae-jin looked up to see a ship descending from the cloudy sky. The vessel was sleek and white, with 4 wing-like projections that marked it as Zephyrian. The ship landed 50 meters away, and a ramp lowered. Captain Ral Vec of the Zephyrian Collective stepped out. His 4 eyes went wide when he saw Tae-jin. The alien captain mouth opened and closed several times before he found his voice. "By the sacred void, what have you done, human? That armor, it cannot be the destroyer mantle was lost when Ethros Prime fell. You should not be able to wear it. You should be dead." Tae-jin tried to speak, but the words came out in a language he had never heard before. The alien captain stepped back in fear and reached for his weapon. Tae-jin raised his hand to show he meant no harm. The gesture accidentally released a pulse of energy that turned a nearby boulder into dust. Both Tae-jin and Captain Ralvek stared at the empty space where the rock had been. The Zephyrian was already speaking rapidly into his communication device, calling for backup and reporting. A code-red emergency. Tae-jin realized his life had just changed forever. And judging by the fear in the alien captain's 4 eyes, it had not changed for the better. Captain Ralvek stumbled backward toward his ship, his 4 eyes never leaving Tae-jin. The human stood perfectly still in the gleaming silver armor, but the alien captain could see energy crackling beneath the surface like lightning trapped in metal. His communication device crackled with urgent voices from his ship. "Emergency response teams are being deployed from 6 sectors. Captain," the voice said through the static, "all major powers are mobilizing fleets. The Galactic Council has issued an immediate capture order for the human designated as Tae-jin of Earth Colony 7. Tae-jin felt a cold shock run through his body, even though the armor kept him warm. The voice in his head that called itself Kethmore spoke again with what sounded like ancient sadness. "The great betrayal begins again, young heir. Just as they destroyed my people, they will try to destroy you. The current rulers of the galaxy built their power on our graves. They will not allow a new Veltar to rise. The armor suddenly felt heavier on Tajin's shoulders, not from weight, but from the crushing responsibility. He was not a warrior or a hero. He was just a mining engineer who had been curious about the wrong thing at the wrong time. Now apparently half the galaxy wanted to capture or kill him. Captain Ralvek reached his ship and shouted orders to his crew. The vessel began to power up its weapon systems. But Tajin could somehow sense the energy building before the captain even gave the command. The armor was feeding him information about threats and opportunities in ways his human brain could barely process. Run air of flesh, Kethmore urged. The hunt has begun, and you are not ready to face what comes. You must learn to use the gifts I offer before they corner you. Tajin did not need to be told twice. He turned and ran toward the mining complex's vehicle depot, moving faster than any human should be able to move. The armor enhanced every step, turning his desperate flight into graceful bounds that covered impossible distances. With each leap he traveled nearly 50 meters, sailing over boulders and ravines that would have stopped him before. Behind him, Captain Ralvek's ship lifted off and began pursuit. But Tajin was already reaching the depot. The mining vehicles were built for rough terrain and heavy loads, but they were not built for speed. He needed something faster, something that could get him off this planet before more ships arrived. The depot supervisor Jung-ho was loading or samples when Tajin arrived. The older man took one look at the silver-armored figure and dropped his datapad. His mouth opened in shock, but no words came out. I need a ship, Tajin said, surprised that his voice now carried strange harmonics that made the air vibrate. Jung-ho pointed with a shaking hand toward the emergency transport pad where a small courier vessel waited. The ship was designed for quick trips between mining sites, not for interstellar travel, but it would have to do. Tajin climbed into the pilot's seat and found that the armor somehow knew how to fly the vessel. His hands moved over the controls with impossible skill, as if he had been piloting ships as whole. Life. The courier ship lifted off just as 3 more vessels appeared in the sky. These were sleek and predatory, looking nothing like Captain Ralvek's diplomatic cruiser. These were hunter ships built for one purpose: capturing prey that did not want to be caught. Tajin pushed the small ship as hard as it would go, climbing toward the upper atmosphere. The armor was teaching him things about physics and energy that his engineering background helped him understand, but the knowledge felt alien, dangerous. His human mind was not built to hold this much information. One of the hunter ships fired a blue beam that passed just behind the courier vessel. Tajin felt the armor's energy systems respond automatically, creating a shield that absorbed the blast. The ship shook but held together. Kethmore spoke urgently in his mind. They use quantum nets designed to disable our technology, but the destroyer mantle has defenses they have forgotten. You must trust the armor air. Let it guide your actions. More ships were appearing on the horizon, coming from every direction. Some were marked with the 3 circles of the Altarian Republic. Others bore the jagged star of the Bruthan Horde. Even the peaceful benevolent Union had sent vessels, their hull markings glowing with soft green light. Tajin reached space and immediately turned toward the outer system, hoping to find a place to hide among the asteroid fields. But space was not empty. 3 massive battleships hung in orbit around Kepler 442b, their weapons trained on his tiny courier vessel. The lead battleship opened communication channels, and a cold mechanical voice filled the courier ship's cabin. Human designation: Tajin, you are in violation of Galactic Statute 4471 regarding the possession of Veltar artifacts. Surrender immediately, and you will be given a fair trial. Resist, and you will be destroyed. Tajin almost laughed at the absurdity. A fair trial for wearing armor that had chosen him. How could he explain that he had not stolen anything that the armor had bonded to him willingly? Nobody would believe him. More importantly, nobody would care. The battleships began to move into attack formation. But something was happening to the courier ship. The armor was extending beyond Taejin's body, spreading across the vessel's hull like liquid mercury. The small ship began to change, growing sleeker and more powerful. Energy levels that should have been impossible for such a tiny vessel began building in systems that had not existed moments before what is happening. Taejin asked, though he was not sure if he spoke aloud or just thought the words. The destroyer mantle can enhance any technology it touches. Kef Moore explained, your vessel is becoming something more than it was, but this transformation will make you easier to track. Every power signature you emit tells them where you are. The transformed ship moved with incredible speed, darting between the battleships before they could react. Taejin found himself flying through narrow gaps in their defensive formations, making turns that should have torn the vessel apart. The armor was not just protecting him, it was making him into the pilot the ship needed. But more ships kept arriving from all directions. The sky around Kepler 442b was filling with vessels from every major power in the galaxy. Some came to capture him, others came to destroy him, and a few seemed to be there just to watch what happened when the most dangerous artifact in galactic history awakened after 3,000 years. Taejin spotted a small independent freighter trying to stay out of the growing battle. The ship bore no military markings and seemed to be piloted by someone who wanted to avoid attention just as much as he did. He opened a communication channel. This is Taejin, I need help. The response came back immediately in a woman's voice that sounded both tough and amused. This is Jin, captain of the Silent Dawn, and you are either the bravest or stupidest human I have ever encountered. Every military force in 3 sectors is hunting you. I did not ask for this, Taejin said, and meant it. The armor chose me, not the other way around. There was a long pause before Jin responded. Well, that makes you the unluckiest man in the galaxy. Follow my ship and try not to get us both killed. The Silent Dawn was faster and more maneuverable than it looked. Jin led him through the asteroid field toward a hidden jump point that her smuggler's charts showed, but military vessels would not know about. Behind them, the various fleets were starting to shoot at each other as much as at Taejin. Different alien powers had different ideas about how to handle this crisis, and none of them involved cooperation as they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the chaos behind. Taejin realized his life as a simple mining engineer was over forever. He was now the most wanted being in the galaxy, wearing armor that made him nearly invincible, but also made him a target for every power-hungry alien race that ruled the stars. The hunt had only just begun. Dia Sora Kim stood in the vast archives of Sanctum Prime, surrounded by data crystals that held the secrets of 1,000 civilizations. The hidden world was known only to the most elite researchers, and she had spent 3 years earning access to its forbidden knowledge. Now, as news of Taejin's situation reached even this remote place, she knew she had to find answers. Message from Taejin had been brief and desperate, but it told her everything she needed to know. Her former colleague had somehow bonded with Veltar technology, and the entire galaxy was hunting him. So Ra had studied the Veltar Empire for most of her career, but she had always suspected that the official history was incomplete. The sudden disappearance of such an advanced civilization made no sense. She pulled up the restricted files that few researchers were allowed to access. The data crystals hummed as they projected holographic documents into the air around her. What she saw made her blood run cold. Treaty of Extinction was signed in secret by the ancestors of today's Galactic Council members. The document was clear and brutal. The Veltar Empire had to be destroyed, not because they were violent or aggressive, but because they were too advanced, too generous with their technology. They had developed something called the Unity Protocol that would allow any species to access their advanced systems, regardless of bloodline or origin. This threatened everything the current galactic powers had built. Their control depended on keeping the most powerful technologies locked away, available only to certain families and bloodlines. If the Veltar had shared their gifts freely, the entire structure of galactic society would have collapsed. So, Ra read through battle reports and diplomatic Cables that painted a picture of systematic genocide. The Veltar had trusted their allies right up until the moment those allies turned on them. The war had been brief and decisive not because the Veltar were weak, but because they had refused to believe that their friends would betray them. Meanwhile, in the depths of space aboard the Silent Dawn, Tae-Jin was discovering that the armor was changing him in ways that went beyond enhanced strength and speed. Jin-A watched with growing concern as her passenger spent hours in meditation, speaking with the AI that lived in his suit. The changes were visible now. Tae-Jin's eyes had taken on a faint silver glow, and his movements had become more graceful, more precise than any human should be capable of. When he worked on repairing damage to her ship, his hands moved with impossible skill, as if he had been an engineer for centuries instead of years. "I am becoming something else," he told Jin-A during one of their conversations. "The armor is not just protecting me, it is rewriting me at the genetic level." Kethmore says this is the ascension process, the way the Veltar created their greatest warriors. Jin-A had seen many strange things in her years as a smuggler, but watching a human slowly transform into something beyond human was disturbing in ways she could not explain. Tae-Jin was still himself, but there was something ancient and powerful growing inside him, something that made her instincts scream warnings. Their peaceful journey was interrupted when Judge Executor Morquin finally tracked them down. The cybernetically enhanced hunter had never failed to bring back a target, and his ship was equipped with technology that made the Silent Dawn look like a toy. Morquin had volunteered for this mission because he wanted to test himself against Veltar technology. The battle took place in the rings of the gas giant Titan 7, where Jin-A had hoped to hide among the ice and rock fragments. Instead, they found themselves in a deadly game of cat and mouse with a hunter who knew every trick they might try. Morquin's ship was fast and heavily armed, but Tae-Jin discovered that the armor could extend its influence beyond his body. When he placed his hands on the Silent Dawn's hull, the entire ship began to change. The smuggling vessel became something sleek and powerful, capable of maneuvers that should have torn it apart. They fought among the spinning chunks of ice and metal, using the debris as cover and weapons. Jin-A had never seen ship combat like this. Tae-Jin was not just piloting her vessel, he was becoming one with it, turning the Silent Dawn into an extension of his enhanced body. But Morquin was no ordinary hunter. His cybernetic implants allowed him to interface directly with his ship systems, and he had studied Veltar combat techniques for decades. The battle raged for hours with both ships taking damage that should have been fatal. The turning point came when Tae-Jin stopped trying to fight like a human and embraced what he was becoming. The armor taught him to manipulate gravity itself, turning the debris field into a weapon. Jin-A watched in amazement as asteroid-sized chunks of ice began orbiting around their ship like a protective shield. Morquin's ship was caught in the gravitational vortex and pulled toward the gas giant's surface. The hunter tried to escape, but the Silent Dawn was everywhere at once, moving in ways that defied physics. Jin-A realized that Tae-Jin was not just wearing the armor anymore. He was becoming something new, something that combined human creativity with Veltar power. The Judge Executor's ship crashed into the planet's upper atmosphere and exploded in a brilliant flash of light. Tae-Jin collapsed in the pilot's seat, exhausted by the effort, but victorious. Jin-A checked the sensors and confirmed what she already knew. The energy output from their battle had been detected by every military scanner in 3 star systems. Every fleet in the galaxy now knew exactly where they were. Sora had finished her research and was preparing to broadcast her findings to the human colonies when she received an encrypted message from Jin-A. The smuggler was asking for safe harbor and medical assistance for Tae-Jin, who had pushed his transforming body beyond its limits during the battle with Morquin. Sora arranged to meet them at an abandoned research station in the Outer Rim, where she could examine Tae-Jin and share what she had learned. The reunion was both joyful and terrifying. Her old colleague was still recognizably human, but the silver veins that ran beneath his skin and the ancient wisdom in his eyes told her that he was becoming something Else the armor has been teaching me about the true history of the galaxy, he told her. The Veltar were not conquerors, they were teachers. They wanted to lift up every species they encountered and share their knowledge freely. That is why they had to be destroyed. Sora showed him the documents she had discovered and watched as anger flickered across his transformed features. The current galactic council was built on the bones of the most peaceful and advanced civilization the galaxy had ever known. They had murdered an entire species to protect their own power and privilege, but the Veltar had prepared for this possibility. Kethmore revealed that there were hidden archives scattered across the galaxy containing the complete knowledge of their civilization. The armor had been leading Te Jin toward these sites where he could learn not just how to fight, but how to rebuild what had been lost. Question now was whether he would use this knowledge for revenge or for something greater. The power growing inside him was enough to shatter worlds, but the wisdom of the Veltar whispered that true strength came from creation, not destruction. As more fleets gathered in nearby systems, preparing for a final assault, Sora began broadcasting her evidence to every human colony and sympathetic alien world. The truth about the Veltar genocide spread like wildfire, igniting protests and demands for justice across the galaxy. The old order was beginning to crack, and Te Jin stood at the center of it all, no longer fully human, but not yet fully Veltar. He was becoming something new, something that the galaxy had never seen before. The question was whether this transformation would save civilization or destroy it. Janae prepared her ship for another desperate run as sensor readings showed massive fleets approaching from all directions. The final confrontation was coming, and none of them knew if they would survive what was about to happen. The hunt was ending, but the real war was just beginning. President Chong-Ho Park stood before the emergency session of the Earth Federation Council, his face grim as he held up the data crystal that contained Dr. Sora Kim's evidence. The massive chamber fell silent as representatives from every human colony leaned forward to hear what their leader had to say. Fellow humans, what I am about to share will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy, he began. The Galactic Council that we have served and respected for generations is built on lies, murder, and the systematic destruction of the most peaceful civilization the universe has ever known. The holographic displays around the chamber came alive with images from the secret archives. The Treaty of Extinction appeared in the air above the delegates' heads, its brutal language clear for all to see. The evidence was overwhelming, detailed, and impossible to deny. The current rulers of the galaxy had committed genocide to protect their own power across human space. The reaction was immediate, and explosive. Colony governors called emergency meetings. Defense fleets began mobilizing, and ordinary citizens took to the streets demanding answers. How many other civilizations had been destroyed to maintain the current order? How many technologies had been hidden away to keep certain species in power? The alien powers tried to control the narrative, but Sora's evidence had spread too far. Chancellor Kefera of the Benevolent Union shocked her own people by calling for the immediate dissolution of the Galactic Council. Supreme Marshal Drak Thor of the Imperial Hierarchy responded by declaring that humans with Veltar technology represented an existential threat that had to be eliminated before it was too late. The galaxy split into factions faster than anyone had expected. Some species had always suspected that the official history was incomplete and welcomed the truth. Others feared that revealing the genocide would destabilize everything they had built over 3 millennia. A few opportunistic powers saw this as a chance to grab territory and resources while the major players were distracted. Jin felt the weight of these galactic changes through his connection to the armor. Kethmore showed him visions of what was happening across known space. Fleets moving into position, politicians making desperate deals, entire worlds choosing sides in a conflict that none of them fully understood. The transformation was nearly complete. Now Te Jin's human DNA had been so thoroughly rewritten that he was essentially a new species. The silver veins beneath his skin pulsed with energy that could power a small city. His mind could process information at speeds that would have driven his original human brain insane, and most importantly, he was beginning to remember things that had happened before he was born. The genetic memories of the Veltar were awakening inside him. He could see their great cities floating among the stars, their libraries that held the wisdom of 1,000,000 worlds, their peaceful ships exploring the galaxy, not to conquer, but to learn and teach. The memories brought both wonder and terrible sadness as he witnessed their destruction through the eyes of those who had lived it. Jin-A watched these changes with growing concern. The man she had agreed to help was disappearing, replaced by something ancient and powerful. She had developed feelings for Tae-jin during their time together, but how could she love someone who was becoming less human every day? Her worry deepened when her younger brother, Minho, contacted her through encrypted channels. He was part of a human resistance movement that wanted to use Tae-jin as a weapon against alien oppression. They saw him as the key to human liberation, a living god who could lead them to victory against species that had kept humanity as second-class citizens for generations. You have to bring him to us, Jin-A Minho pleaded during their secret communication. He's the most powerful being in the galaxy, and he is one of us. We can finally take our rightful place among the stars, instead of begging for scraps from alien masters. Jin-A knew that using Tae-jin as a weapon would destroy everything good about what he was becoming. The Veltar had been peaceful teachers, not conquerors. If humanity followed the path of revenge and domination, they would become everything the Veltar had stood against. The moral dilemma was solved when the Battle of Haven Station began. Admiral Korath had assembled the largest military force in galactic history, over 15,000 ships from dozens of different species. All of them had come to eliminate the human who dared to wear Veltar armor. Haven Station was a civilian trade hub home to millions of beings from hundreds of different worlds. It should have been neutral territory protected by ancient treaties, but the Admiral had decided that Tae-jin represented such a threat that collateral damage was acceptable. The battle began when Tae-jin arrived at the station in the transformed Silent Dawn, hoping to evacuate civilians before the military forces attacked. But Admiral Korath had positioned his fleets to use the station itself as a shield, forcing Tae-jin to choose between his own safety and the lives of innocent people. There was no choice to make. Tae-jin extended the armor's influence beyond his ship and around the entire massive station, creating a force field that could protect millions of lives. Required more energy than any single being should be able to generate, but the Veltar had designed their greatest armor for exactly this kind of impossible task. The sight of a human surrounded by silver light protecting an entire space station from the combined firepower of 15,000 warships became the defining image of the conflict. Across the galaxy, beings watched in amazement as Tae-jin held off weapons that could crack planets. His force field shimmered and sparked under the assault, but held firm for 6 hours. The bombardment continued with Admiral Korath throwing everything he had at the impossible barrier. Jin-A coordinated the civilian evacuation, while Tae-jin poured every ounce of his transformed strength into keeping the shield intact. Ships that tried to break through his defenses were gently but firmly pushed away. He was protecting everyone, friend and enemy alike. The Admiral finally called off the attack when it became clear that his forces could not break through Tae-jin's defenses. The human had demonstrated power beyond anything in the current galactic arsenal, but he had used it only to protect innocent lives. This was not the behavior of a conqueror or a weapon of revenge. As news of the Battle of Haven Station spread, the political situation shifted dramatically. Beings who had feared Tae-jin as a threat began to see him as a protector. Species that had been planning to join the military coalition against humanity started questioning whether they were on the right side. Dr. So-ra used this moment to reveal the final piece of evidence she had discovered: the location of Ethros Prime, the lost homeworld of the Veltar Empire. According to the ancient records, the planet was protected by automated defenses that had destroyed every ship that approached for 3,000 years. But those defenses would recognize a true heir to the Veltar. Legacyta Jin knew that Ethros Prime held the complete archives of Veltar. Civilization, enough knowledge and technology to transform the galaxy. The question was whether he was strong enough to reach it and wise enough to use what he found there responsibly. Transformation was almost complete, but the hardest test still lay ahead. He was no longer the curious mining engineer who had stumbled upon an ancient suit of armor. He was becoming something new, something that could either heal the galaxy's ancient wounds or tear it apart completely. Legion A made her choice. She would stand by him not because he was becoming a god, but because he was still trying to be a good man. The power growing inside him was terrifying, but his heart remained gentle. His strength could shatter worlds, but he used it to build shields instead of weapons. As they prepared for the journey to Ethros, Prime fleets from across the galaxy began moving toward the same destination. Some came as allies, others as enemies, but all of them knew that whatever happened there would determine the future of galactic civilization. The final confrontation was approaching, and with it the answer to the question that had haunted the galaxy for 3 millennia. What happens when a dead empire rises again, and its heir has the power to reshape the stars? Ethros Prime hung in space like a jewel wrapped in silver clouds. The planet was beautiful beyond description, with crystal cities that still gleamed after 3,000 years of abandonment. But the space around the world was filled with the wreckage of ships that had tried to approach over the millennia. The automated defense systems had kept their vigil, faithfully turning away all visitors with deadly force. Jin stood on the bridge of the Silent Dawn, staring at his destination. Through eyes that now glowed with inner silver light, the transformation was complete. He was no longer human in any biological sense, but the memories and values of his original self remained. His heart still beat with human compassion, even though it now pumped energy instead of blood. Behind him stretched the largest fleet ever assembled. Representatives from every major power in the galaxy had followed him here. Some came as allies, hoping to share in whatever secrets the planet held. Others came as enemies, determined to prevent any resurrection of Veltar power. Most came simply because they knew this moment would reshape the galaxy forever. Fleet Admiral Nexus commanded the Galactic Council forces from his massive flagship, the Eternal Judgment. Admiral Korath had been demoted after his failure at Haven Station, but his replacement was far more dangerous. Nexus believed that order was more important than justice and would destroy entire civilizations to maintain stability. The defense systems activated as the fleet approached. The space around Ethros Prime filled with energy constructs that dwarfed the largest battleships. Weapons that had been waiting 3 millennia for targets finally had something to shoot at, but instead of destroying the approaching ships, the ancient guardians simply disabled them with surgical precision. Every vessel in the massive fleet found itself drifting helplessly as their power systems were neutralized. The Veltar defenses could have annihilated the entire armada in seconds, but they chose mercy instead. Even after 3,000 years of exile, they remained true to their peaceful nature only. The Silent Dawn was allowed to continue toward the planet. Its transformed hull resonated with Veltar frequencies that the Guardians recognized as legitimate. The automated systems were not just weapons, they were the digital souls of the greatest Veltar minds, uploaded to eternal service as protectors of their world's. Legacyta Jin piloted the ship through the crystal cities toward a massive pyramid at the planet's heart. Jin-A sat beside him, watching in wonder as beings of pure energy emerged from the ancient buildings to observe their approach. These were the Sentinels, the uploaded consciousness of Veltar heroes who had volunteered to become eternal. Guardian Sentinel Prime Velkaros materialized on the ship's bridge as a figure of silver light. Its voice carried the weight of eons and the sadness of a civilization that had been betrayed by those it trusted most. So the heir finally comes, the Sentinel said, examining Tae-Jin with eyes that held starlight. You wear our greatest armor and carry our genetic legacy, But are you worthy of what we offer? The power to reshape. The galaxy is not given lightly. The trial of ascension began as soon as they landed. T-Jin found himself in a vast chamber where holographic projections of the greatest Veltar warriors awaited him, but this was not a test of combat skills. The Veltar measured worth by wisdom, compassion, and the ability to unite rather than divide. Each projection presented him with a moral dilemma, a planet facing destruction where saving it would require sacrificing another world, a species asking for advanced weapons to defend against invaders who had legitimate grievances, a choice between personal happiness and the greater good of the galaxy. Te-Jin answered each challenge, drawing on both his human experiences and the ancient wisdom the armor had given him. He chose mercy over justice when justice would cause greater suffering. He picked cooperation over dominance, even when dominance would be easier. He selected the harder path that led to real peace instead of the simple solution that only delayed conflict. The final test came when Sentinel Prime Velkaros offered him unlimited power, the ability to become a god emperor who could impose perfect order on the galaxy through force. All the problems that plagued civilization could be solved if he was willing to rule with absolute authority. This was the test that mattered most. The Veltar had fallen because they refused to use their power to dominate others. They had chosen to be teachers instead of rulers, and their enemies had destroyed them for that choice. Would their heir make the same mistake? Te-Jin looked at the offer of godhood and smiled. I am not here to rule anyone, he said. I am here to give everyone the chance to rule themselves. The Veltar were destroyed because they threatened the power of tyrants. Let me threaten them with something even more dangerous, the chance for every being to reach their full potential. The Sentinels approved his answer, and the planet itself began to change. Ancient systems that had slept for millennia came online. Crystal spires rose from the ground, reaching toward the stars. The Unity Protocol that had been the Veltar's greatest achievement and the cause of their destruction was finally activated in space. The disabled fleets watched in amazement as Ethros Prime transformed into something beyond their understanding. The planet became a beacon that reached across the galaxy, offering the gift of advanced technology to any species that would use it wisely. The restrictions based on bloodline and political connection were swept away, but the Unity Protocol came with conditions. Those who accepted Veltar technology also accepted Veltar values: peace over war, creation over destruction, teaching over hoarding. Knowledge, the power was freely given, but it could not be used for conquest or oppression. Some species embraced the offer immediately. The benevolent Union had always followed peaceful principles and found that Veltar technology enhanced their natural abilities. The smaller civilizations that had been kept in poverty by the current system saw this as their chance for true equality. Others rejected it violently. Supreme Marshal Drakthor managed to restore power to his flagship and immediately opened fire on Ethros Prime, but the planet's defenses were now fully active, and his weapons had no more effect than throwing stones at a star. Real conflict came from within the human fleets. President Chang-Ho Park had come to Ethros Prime, hoping to claim Veltar technology for humanity alone. When he realized that the power would be shared equally with all species, he felt betrayed. You could make humanity the masters of the galaxy, he told Te-Jin during a heated communication. We have been treated as second-class citizens for too long. This is our chance to take what we deserve. Te-Jin felt sadness for his former leader, but his answer was firm. If we use this power to become oppressors, then we will deserve the same fate. As the original Veltar, the galaxy does not need new masters. It needs the chance to grow beyond the need for masters at all. Transformation of galactic civilization did not happen overnight. Many species needed time to adjust to the new reality of freely available advanced technology. Some governments collapsed as their people realized they no longer needed corrupt leaders. Others adapted and became stronger than ever, but the changes were unstoppable. The Unity Protocol spread from world to world, carried by beings who had been touched by Veltar wisdom, trade routes that had been controlled by powerful cartels, became open highways. Scientific knowledge that had been hoarded in secret laboratories was shared freely. Art and culture flowed between species that had never communicated before. Jin established the new galactic accord on Ethros Prime, but he refused to become its ruler. Instead, he served as its first guardian, a protector whose job was to ensure that the old mistakes were never repeated. The accord had no emperor or supreme council, just representatives from every member species working together as equals. Dr. So Ra founded the Veltar Memorial Institute to preserve the true history of the galaxy and ensure that the genocide was never forgotten or repeated. Jin A led the new exploration corps, seeking out civilizations that might have been erased from galactic records. Like the Veltar had been, some of the old powers tried to resist Admiral Nexus gathered the remaining Council loyalists and declared war on the Accord. But when he attacked a member world, he discovered that Veltar defensive technology made conquest impossible. His weapons could not penetrate shields powered by the same energy that lit stars. The war ended not with a great battle, but with a quiet realization. The old system of domination and control had become obsolete. Species that embraced cooperation and sharing grew stronger, while those that clung to the old ways found themselves increasingly isolated, and irrelevant. Years passed and the galaxy transformed beyond recognition. Worlds that had been barren became gardens. Species that had been enemies became partners. Technologies that had seemed impossible became commonplace. The Unity Protocol had not just shared knowledge, it had shared hope. Jin stood on the observation deck of Ethros Prime, watching ships from 100 different species work together to build a new kind of civilization. He was no longer human, but he had helped humanity and every other species become something better than they had been before. Jin joined him at the viewport, her own body now enhanced by Veltar biotechnology that had extended her lifespan and sharpened her mind. She was still recognizably human, but like everyone who accepted the Unity Protocol, she had become more than she was born to be. Do you ever regret it? She asked him. The choice to share instead of rule.